Okay, we're getting ready to move on from step 102 to 103. In step 102, we built our menu using a JSON file and some recursion so that we could loop through and get our submenus all good. In step 3, we're gonna take it a lot further. We're gonna go ahead and we're gonna do a couple really cool things in step 3. First thing we're going to do is we're going to give those links some meaning. These links now are links will actually be pulled from our WordPress site. From the API, we're going to learn a little more about APIs and about JSON. And we already created this menu with JSON. Now we're going to go ahead and create this menu with JSON from a WordPress site instead of a static file on our server. In addition to that, we're going to go ahead and we're going to put some interactivity. We can see the loader here in the background going on with the gears. And what we're actually doing is we're actually pulling information from our WordPress site and displaying it into our web application. Um, some other things that we're doing is we did a little CSS trickery down here to just display what page we're on, what information we're getting. We are doing things like, if you notice, I scrolled to the bottom of the page. When I click on you, it sets the scroll right back up to the top of the page so that we can start at the top of the page when we load something. Additionally, you'll notice we put a little bit of CSS effects in there to fade in and fade out our content, so it looks a little more like a cool application as opposed to um, just a simple reload of a website. Excellent. So in this lesson, we're going to go ahead. You should have all your pages created. If you don't, go over that in depth a little bit here in the beginning. You can skip that part if you have your pages created. We'll make sure that you have your nested pages installed so that you can manage your pages a little more easily, as well as we're going to add a new plugin called WP REST API menus. And that's what's going to allow us to go ahead and actually grab our menus in JSON and to use those menus in a way that we can feed them into our application, into our website application, and manage the menus from our WordPress backend and pull them from our application to create the menu that we saw here. Additionally, we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the API as well to pull pages, pull page information. In that page, we're going to dynamically know what link to use through actually using our information that we pull out of our menu API. So this should be a pretty exciting lesson. Let's go ahead and let's get started. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get ready to do our menus in our pages from our WordPress site and our HTML5 application that we're building. In order to do this, we need to make sure that we have certain things ready. First of all, we need to have all of our pages. So let's go and check and make sure that we're all good with our pages. The pages are the pages that we build in the Inside Out project. They are the Love Who Challenges You, and they're nested, and we use nested pages. If you're setting this up fresh, you'll want to install that plugin, and we want our pages to be laid out specifically in this order, because we want our linking to read specific ways, like who I was then, who I am now, so on and so forth. So we have Love Who Challenges You. You can put these in a while if you would like. We will be adding these pages later. Career, privacy, policy, terms and condition, frequently asked questions. They will go in the footer of our page. In order to get ready for this portion of the project, though, make sure that you have these pages, the Love Who Challenges You, and all their sub pages in there as well. The way that we're going to be accessing it is through APIs. And so before we start diving into what the API looks like, we're going to go ahead and we're going to go to our plugins And let's just go to add new plugin. And the first plugin that we want to make sure that we have in, that we install, is WP API Menus. Now, I'm going to suggest that we do something that I normally highly suggest against. You'll see the top two that show up is the version 2 and the old version 1, which hasn't been maintained for a year. The reason I'm going to suggest that we go with this one is that it actually allows us to use menu locations and menu titles. This one only allows us to use locations. This will make more sense to you as we move along in the project. But you want to go ahead and you want to install this WP API Menus, not the version 2, the version 1. Additionally, if you're just setting up your site, as a side note, to create those pages, the best way to do that is to install the plugin that we installed in Web 100 called Nested Pages. Allows you to create multiple pages at one time, and it allows you to drag and drop them to lay them out as we could see. So now that we have our plugins installed, our nested pages, if you are just catching up, so that you can actually manage your pages in this manner. The next thing that we want to do is we want to go to our menus. This should be all overview for you. That's why I'm not walking through step by step, and you should be able to catch up pretty well. Up top here, we're aware that we can create different menus, and for our website, we created for our actual just WordPress website, this version of it, so that if we go out and we look at it real quick, and if you notice, I'm putting this in the inside out HTML5 app subdomain under our WordPress folder because we're using it as a back-end tool. We're not really using it as a front-end tool. But you'll notice that all the pages are there, and in the menu up top here. And I have put some filler content in. I just did a bunch of bios by different people. You're more than welcome to do that as well, although I do challenge you to revisit the Web 100 and actually put the information in the pages that is relative to the page. But you can see our menu up here. That's what we're focused on. We're focused on creating our menus, and the thing that we want to do is, so we have this menu as our main menu being used in our front end of our website, but what we really want to do is we want to create a menu that we're going to leverage just for our API calls for the menu in our website. And the way that we do that is we just go ahead and create new menu. And what I would like you to do is create the API menu. And the reason that we create a separate menu is we may want to change the layout. If we start using the front end of the website, we may want things to be different in our application website as opposed to our WordPress website. It's important to really open your mind as we're doing this project and pay attention to why we're learning how to do this. Essentially, you have a way to come back here in your WordPress backend and create a website and use a website with all kinds of functionality that in the end, we actually can go ahead and use it to manage a web application and build our menu, which will pop up. You can see this is what we're working on in this project. It may take a little time because you're actually reaching out to the server, which is why we put those silly little gears in the background to show that something's going on. And this menu was actually built from the WordPress website. And to further demonstrate that, to show you, if you look, we have view profile settings. If we go into our WordPress website that we're working on, and we have our API menu, which is what I'm pulling from right now, and I take settings and I actually put them up here under challenges just for demonstration, and I save it. Internet's running slow. And I save it, and then I come out and I refresh. It's my note. You'll see that the settings has moved to underneath challenges. Beats the hell out of coding. So I'm going to go ahead and put that back. Put that under profile, actually. I'm going to save that. And I'm going to come back over here, and I'm going to refresh my app, and there it is under profile. And actually, let's go ahead and just move it right back under view. Save it again. Test it out. View, profile settings. Awesome. And we can see the other thing we're doing in this is we're pulling the content for each one of these pages from our WordPress website as well. Great. So what exactly is happening here? What we just set ourselves up for, and we're going to work more with, but that API, the Menus API plugin that we put in, allows us to actually leverage WordPress API. We're familiar with JSON because in 102 we're building our menu from a JSON file. In here we're just asking for that file to come dynamically and give us some information. And we'll be going over this as we move on in the lesson. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with coding. First thing we want to do is, if you're working locally, which I am, go ahead and get your WAMP. Go to your local host and go to your project. And go and make sure that things look right as far as your local host is working. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to create our 103 folder, our step 103. So I just put that there because I'm going to go right back here to Dreamweaver, and I'm going to go on my step 102, and I'm going to hit Control D and duplicate it, and then I'm going to rename it to 103. Do an update, refresh my local files. I'm going to go out, make sure that took, and there's everything as I would expect it. Good to get going on that. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to come into my files, and I'm going to expand everything. Our data, we'll just leave that there. We're not going to use that anymore at the moment. And I'm going to open up my index.html file. And what I'm going to do in here is I'm going to go to code view. And in my code view, I'm going to reduce these panels down to 3 for each section, just so I can see more as I'm working. I'll take care of that. Hit save, go out and check that, make sure that looks good. The other thing we want to do is go ahead and inspect and get our console open. We can clear that. And so at the moment, everything's working, no errors. We'll go ahead and clear cache and do one more reload just to make sure we're not getting any errors, which we're not. We're good to go there. All right, so let's go ahead and start working on bringing this menu over. Um, First thing we want to do is we want to look at where we're going to bring the menu over from. To bring the menu over, we just have the local and the remote. We'll stay on local here. We'll work on local, clear things up. This is our remote. This is our WordPress backend. If you see, here's our WordPress. If you see up here, we have WordPress. Now, WordPress has what we call an API built in. And what an API allows us to do is basically pull all the data and the content from a WordPress website in JSON format. It's broken down, and we use something called endpoints. And so endpoints are basically where we can grab information from. If you don't get the concept of endpoints, hopefully you'll start to as we move along. We know that the endpoint that we want is we want to get information about our menus, and we can either do it through two endpoints. It's our WP JSON, WP API menus, v2 menus. And what that does is it actually gives us our menus, which we're looking for our API menu that we created. And we have 3 other menus in there as well. The other thing that allows us to do is pull our menu locations. And we may want to do that at some point depending on a theme we're using or something of that nature. And we can click on here, and if we're familiar with our theme, we know that we have a primary menu, a one-page menu, and a top bar menu. And that's what our theme currently offers. We're not worried about the locations right now. What we are worried about is the menus themselves, because what we want to do is we want to access that API menu that we created. We called it API menu. And that menu is its ID is 6. And we simply do this by, you'll see, just by putting the 6 at the end of the URL. Now, what we can do is we can take this and we can go to our code in our Dreamweaver. And we're going to just actually stay right here in our index.html and use the built-in functionality of Dreamweaver and go to our app.js. It allows us to go to any file that's being pulled in. And the first thing that we want to do is go down to our menuBuilder. And actually, I take that back. That's not the first thing that we want to do. The first thing that we want to do is go to our ajax call that gets the information that we feed to the menuBuilder. And what we're going to do is we're going to replace what we had in there, which was our JSON file, and we're going to actually just go ahead and replace that with that API call, with that endpoint. And we'll go out and we'll take a look at our site and we'll see exactly what that did to it. And what it did is it should actually blow up our menu. We get no menu whatsoever. Now, the way that we can go and tell if this is working, you just saw we got an error because it doesn't know what to do with the menu, with the JSON information that we pulled in from our WordPress site. And so the first thing we want to do is let's just make sure it's coming in. So if we go out to our network and we look at our XHR, right, our requests, and we can see here by hovering over this that we got the inside out. We're actually pulling that WP API menus. And let's go ahead and see, if we click on it, we can actually see what our response, what our headers, what our information is as far as all that goes. And we can see that in our response, we did in fact get the menu. It's quite a bit of information. We can preview it by looking at it here. Nice part about that is it helps you to not have to keep going back. You can see love, who, challenges, you. It should look pretty familiar based on what we did with our other. And the only reason that our menu is actually not building, we don't have to do all that much. If you recall, we had named our menu, some of the naming conventions that we used are very different to the naming conventions that we have in here. And so to make it a little easier, we'll go and look at the response of the menu. And the first thing that we notice is that we're not pulling from menus, we're pulling from items. So if I were to go back out to my code and I look at it, what I can see is we're seeing data.menu because inside our JSON file, we actually were pulling menu. Now that we're making the API call, what we want is everything below items. So what we can do is we can go ahead and we can update here our data.items. And now what that will do is that we'll actually pull in that list below items that we're familiar with. We know everything falls below items here. That's our whole menu. And we'll go ahead and we'll save it. It's not going to make our menu work, but we're going to go out and take a look real quick. We're going to clear cache, empty cache. We're going to bring it through. We see that we're still calling our JSON. There's our response. And so now we're looking inside and we're actually seeing our items. What is different is that we have menu title. Instead of title, they have title here. And that's the actual name of the menu. So we'll go ahead and we'll, instead of naming our menu title, we'll go ahead and replace it with title, because that's the piece that we want to go after. Now at this point we are passing this into our menuBuilder, and we're going to come down to our menuBuilder, and we're building the menu. We don't have to change that. We're coming in here and, oh, actually we were using menu name. Now what we want to call it, is title. And I do believe we will get an error, but we should get something now because we're bringing the data in, we're looping through the items, and at this point, I believe we might get the top level in. And we did not. Oh, and the reason is it's checking for length. One of the things we can do at this point is we can stop looking for length. But what we're going to do first in the submenus, but we'll talk about that in a second. And let's comment this out. Because when you're coding like this, you want to take things in steps, especially when you're changing functionality that you already have implemented. And now if we come back and we empty the cache, clear our console, we can actually see that we're getting our top menu items now from our WordPress API call. Those are coming from items, title. And it's only doing the top level because if you recall, what we did do is we are not looking for submenus right now. So now let's go after those submenus. Let's talk about length real quick. Unfortunately, sometimes length can be a real problem when you're using recursion. And the reason being is that things that are identified inside of a function are often exclusive just to that instance of that function. Meaning, when you call multiple times, you're trying to pass along information that's not necessarily there. And so the way that we're going to deal with that is instead of going after length, what we're going to do is we're just going to say if menus, first of all. And second of all, if you look, it's no longer menus, it's children. Same concept, same everything. It's just that now instead of calling it menus, we're calling it children. So we can actually just go in here and say children and children. And at this point, we'll see if we're lucky, we might end up with our menu. And of course, in the background, that call's being made and we're waiting for it. And there we go. We actually have our menus now, which is awesome. One last thing that we want to do is that we know that we're going to pass along information. And that information is that we want to be able to call a page. And so what we need to know is, what is this menu item referencing? And we call that an object ID in WordPress. And so this is actually a page or a post ID that this menu item is associated with. And so we know that if we want to get to that page in our WordPress API, what we need to do is we need to first navigate out and understand where our pages are. The easiest way to do that is actually go out to our WP-JSON. And these are our endpoints. This is basically our reference guide. And what we can do is we can search for pages. And we can see that we can get the pages by going WP-JSON, WP JSON v2 pages. And what this is going to do, it's going to give us a list of the pages that are currently in our site. So now there's a list of our pages that are currently in our site. And what we're going to do is we're going to just take a look at let's take a look. Let's go ahead. Let's just use settings. Let's take a look at settings. If we come back here to the menu and we go down under U and we look at its children and we look at settings, we can see the object ID is 48. If we come over here and we look at our API, we can see that our object ID is 48. So what's cool about that is we can specifically just call one page at a time by appending the object ID. Where that helps us is now as we're building our menu, we know we have access to the object ID itself. And we can build it right into our menu link. And the way that we're going to do that, instead of putting it in the href, because we're building an app, we want to use something called a data attribute. And that data attribute allows us to define different attributes within our code, within our elements. And we can pull on those attributes at a later point, as you will see. But what we want to do is we want to create this data attribute, and then inside that data attribute, we want to say we want to see the object ID. And so if I go ahead and I put that in there and I hit save, and I go out to my app and I refresh it, and I click and I inspect, I can see that the page ID is in there. And if we did everything right, if we take that 38, and we come out here and we put that 38, we should end up with challenges, which is exactly what we clicked on over here. What we inspected over here was challenges. And that's actually how we'll go ahead and work on getting our page data as well. All right, so now it's time to take those links and the data page ID and create a function.